Welcome back to the table. Today I'm very excited to get to talk about Dragon Eclipse, the new game coming from Awaken Realms. Now, this is a sponsored video. They did send over a prototype copy of this game for me to play, and it's not necessarily exact prototype, it's more of a demo copy with some content that was tailored to the solo experience. Now, this game has two play modes, and I was lucky enough to get a version of the game that had both, so I'm going to be able to talk about both of those different play modes. One of which is the scenario-based campaign mode, where you're going to be playing through a series of booklets that tell an overarching story. I was given two scenarios to play, and I played through both of them, so I've gotten to see a lot of what this demo copy has to offer. The other version of the game is a roguelite version, and this is a combat-focused game where you're going to be fighting your way through a battle map, trying to push yourself farther and farther. If you've ever played a roguelite video game or you're familiar with that concept, you know it's all about getting as far as you can, resetting with some better stuff, and then pushing again until you can ultimately defeat a boss. I'm going to talk about both of those versions, and they do have a lot in common, especially when it comes to the way that combat plays out. They're using a lot of the same components. However, there are some different elements with the scenario-based gameplay. You're going to be going through some story attached to that and a few different types of maps that you're going to be going through as well. So I do want to break it down, and I'm going to talk about that campaign version first. So first of all, let's look at everything that comes with this game, because I do have it all spread out here and already set up. Down here is where you're going to have the map that you're going to interact with the story mode, and the scenario book that you have is going to tell you how to kind of set up that map and interact with that map. I'll talk about that more later, but there's a lot that goes into that actual section of the game. But up above it is where you're going to have combat set up, and I've already got this kind of set up as you'd have it in a game. You've got your character card, and I chose Emberling to start, but you're going to have access to a few different characters, a few different dragons, and you're going to have the option to actually tame those dragons over the course of the game. This is a pretty cool concept, or a pretty cool thing that you can do, is actually tame these creatures and get them over to your side and build decks for them and use them. Your game comes with a set of deck boxes, and this is like your character chest. You can have two characters ready to go, two decks built to represent your two different dragons, and you're going to choose one to take with you through a particular scenario. There's also this thing of knowledge. This is going to be where you place cards as you discover them, as you learn more about these different types of dragons. You're going to be putting them into this archive, and it's going to actually give you a card with some information, so you can keep track of all of the different dragons that you've encountered, even the ones that you didn't tame, which they're not all tameable, but a lot of them are. You're going to be able to keep track and kind of flip through this as, you know, a memory of everything that you played through. A lot of this game is card-based. You're going to see cards everywhere. You're going to have some cards for your decks. You're going to have some cards for the enemies, some items. It's all going to be held in this organizer that comes with it. It's going to be separated out. You're going to have some stuff that is actually sealed in packs. So as you get to certain points in the campaign, it's going to have you add new cards, so you're not spoiling everything at the start of the game. However, some of these elements that you're seeing here are from the first couple scenarios, but I'm not going to spoil anything in any kind of detail. So this is set up for combat. So let's talk about how combat works, because I think that is something that people are interested in. This is, like I said, a solo or two-player game. I have the solo rules, so I've been playing solo, but there are two-player rules where you can co-op this or actually play PvP against other players. They can bring their decks, and you can bring your decks and your dragons, and you can kind of fight them out. But if you're just playing through the scenarios or playing through that roguelite mode, you're going to be playing against an AI. And again, this is all going to be set up in a very particular way. When you get to a combat session in the storybook, it's going to tell you, put this book aside, go to combat, set it up this particular way. There are some special cards for the roguelite that are going to tell you who you're fighting and how you're setting it up as well. There are two things that kind of factor into your setup. One of them is the arena card, and this arena kind of determines where you're fighting. Everything is done on this same hex map, but you're going to have some very specific setup instructions and potentially some very specific rules changes based on the arena that you're playing. You're also going to have the dragon that you're fighting, and that is up here at the top. There are a couple cards that go into making up a dragon. You're going to have a special setup card, which will tell you how to set up the arena and dictate any special rules for that encounter. And the other side of that is going to lay down, and it's going to show you their actions and their special abilities. Of course, all of their vital stats are printed on their card, as well as their element. There's also a taming card that comes with it if that particular monster can be tamed. They can't all be, but if you want to tame it, instead of actually just fighting it and trying to defeat it, you can go through a series of challenges, and as you complete them, you mark them with tokens. If you get through that third challenge, then you get to tame the monster. On the back of each arena card, it's going to tell you what happens if you win, if you lose, or if you manage to tame the monster. So even if you lose a particular combat, the story still moves forward. You just might miss out on some opportunities, you might miss out on some information, or you might suffer some kind of penalty or fatigue moving forward. Now there's a special arena card for the Roguelite that's going to tell you what to do as you finish those combats, so we'll talk about that in a minute. Now your character deck is going to come and sit right here next to your character cards, and just like the enemy, your character is going to have their stat card and their special ability card, and they're going to have their attached element. You'll notice that Emberling is fire, so I set aside the fire card, plus you can just grab any player aid that you want. Each one of these elements is going to give you a set of bonus actions that you can take on your turn, plus your dragon is going to have a special ability as well. Now the setup's also going to tell you where to place these figures on the board. It's going to tell you where to place any tokens, including potentially any elemental tokens that might trigger different things or be used for the enemy's special abilities. Now at the start of the combat, you're going to have your deck of 10 cards, and you're going to splay them out in each one of these 4 sections. This kind of becomes the offer, the cards that you're going to get to play on your turn. You don't really have a hand of cards, but you're going to get to choose one of these 4 cards. And you might notice each one of these cards has some symbols above it. These are elemental tokens that you're trying to collect in combat. So these cards do a variety of different things. There is a whole LCG deck building element to the game. As you progress through both the roguelite or just the campaign, you're going to be unlocking new cards, adding new cards to your deck, taking some cards out until you've kind of built something that works really well for you, because there are a variety of different types of things you can do in the game. There's status elements and things like that. You can give upgrades to your character, some bonuses. So you kind of have the ability to tailor the deck to how you want it, and you're going to get to choose which of these cards you use every turn. So the combat is purely deterministic. You're not actually going to be rolling dice or doing anything other than playing a card and doing all of the text. Some of that text is going to have you do damage to the monster. It might have some abilities that are triggered that push or move or give you bonus actions or movement or things like that. Every time you choose one of these actions to take, you're going to gain the elemental tokens and place them on your character card. So I would gain 3 if I play this card that's in the 4th slot. These are important because these are how you fuel your bonus actions. You can do some moves, some attacks, and you can kind of clear out this row a little bit by taking your bonus actions, or you could save up for your special ability that usually does a lot of damage. Now, after you completely resolve all of the text of the card, which usually involves you moving around the board, taking a specific actions, potentially augmenting your character, those cards are going to go into the discard pile. Some cards are actually going to have a passive benefit that triggers if they're on top of the discard pile, so there is a lot of timing that goes into the game. After you've done your action, you're going to check and see if you want to do any of your bonus actions, but if you're done, you simply draw out a new card, and then you allow the enemy to take their turn. So, like I said, it's all very deterministic. If a card deals damage, if it tells you that you can attack, you look at your character's attack. Emberling is 5, and this Furple that I'm fighting has the defense of 1. So every time I attack it, I'm going to do 4 damage to it. Now there are some attacks that can bypass armor. There's some things that give you bonus armor and stuff like that as well. So you really can, like I said earlier, customize your playstyle to how you want to play maybe a more defensive game or a more aggressive game. But once you're done, the monster is going to get to go, and every monster has a deck of monster cards. And again, this deck is going to be built during setup. It's going to tell you how many of each type of card to put in it, so you know how likely it is that the enemy is going to do any one particular ability. And their abilities are all printed right on the side of the card, including their special ability. At the setup of the game, you're going to be placing out this token on one of these card slots. After you place a card in that slot, you would do that special ability. So the second action this monster takes is going to slot in the second slot here, and then they would also trigger their special ability. So you would look at what the symbol is, you would find the match, and you would do whatever it says to do. And there's some rules in the rule book about that AI, like when it moves, it rushes towards you, it retreats away from you, it potentially goes to the farthest space if it's trying to avoid you. There's a variety of different things, that all of these monsters are different. They all have different attack values that are represented on their card. They all have different special abilities. Some of them even have passive abilities that trigger all the time. But the enemy is going to carry out as much of that action as possible, which usually involves moving into you, doing damage. Again, the same way you're putting cubes on your character sheet. And this is going to go back and forth with you taking some actions, the opponent drawing a new card, and then seeing who wins the fight. And like I said earlier, the fight can end in one of three ways. Either you get knocked out, which means you've taken your full health points worth of damage. You've knocked out the enemy, which means you've dealt them that much damage. Or you've qualified for taming, which means you've met all of the conditions on that card. Now, the taming and the collecting characters is only done during the campaign. You're not doing that at all in the roguelite version of the game, because this is going to give you characters that can come into your divider, into the little party section, and later when you play different scenarios, you can choose which character you want to play. So you can choose one of the starting characters, or you can choose from any of the characters that you've tamed so far to be the character that you bring with you into the campaign. Now, if you see over here, all of these miniatures, a lot of these are going to represent the monsters that you're fighting in the game and also the monsters that can potentially be tamed. Some of these are only going to be encountered in the roguelite, at least from what I have, but some of these monsters were available in the demo as well. So you're going to be able to encounter and fight a wide variety of monsters, each with its own setup, its own cards, its own special abilities, and stuff like that. But you're only going to be entering combat when the campaign book tells you to enter combat. If we're playing in the story, as you flip over that arena card and do the thing that you're doing, whichever ending you had, it's going to tell you to read a passage in the book, and then you're going to move on through a series of choose your own adventure prompts. This book is going to ask you questions. It's going to check to see if you have certain cards that you've gotten earlier, certain tokens. There is a branching narrative. I played through, like I said, both scenarios, and I definitely did not see everything. I cheated a little. I looked at what some of the other outcomes would be, and there are some very different paths that will take you through these scenarios, and they will give you some very different cards. And there are a lot of secret cards that you can collect in a lot of different ways. Some of these secret cards are going to be done via the map, but some of them are just going to be done by making certain decisions in this rule book or in the scenario book, and it's going to tell you which particular secret card to keep, and you're going to carry that throughout the different scenarios. So you might get a secret card in scenario 1 by making a certain decision that later in scenario 3 or 4, it's going to check for that, and if you've got it, you might unlock a specific dialogue option or a different path that would have been blocked if you hadn't done that thing all the way back in scenario 1. So these decisions you're making actually do have a huge impact, not just within the scenario, but also in the branching narrative of the game. Of course, if you're playing the roguelite, after combat, you're going to move on to the next combat, and that is just a series of combats that are going to get more challenging. But if you're actually playing the scenario, it's going to tell you what to do next. So let me talk about that a little bit, because there are going to be some sections where it tells you to go to a specific map. And you'll see right here that I have the first map of the game, map 1, set up, and you're going to see that there are a variety of different numbers. This is kind of a free roam, sandboxy part of the game. There's really no turn structure here. You can just kind of investigate any one of these areas that you want to investigate, but there's a few really unique twists here that I want to talk about. First of all is this time tracker. Certain actions in the game are going to cause you to move that time tracker down. Not every action is going to do that, but some will. As you move it down, you're eventually going to move it off to the secret card. You're going to reveal the secret card, and it's going to tell you something to do. It might just end that particular part of the scenario, or it might make some changes to the board. You don't know what it's going to be until you reach there. Just like you don't know what you're going to get when you investigate any one of these locations. But this board is going to change over time by placing tokens into some of these slots. For example, if you go to a specific location, you might meet someone that says, hey, can you go ask the blacksmith for a favor? I need something from them. It'll tell you to place this A token wherever the blacksmith is. Then when you go talk to the blacksmith, it'll have a dialogue option in the book that says, is token A here? If so, go to a different passage, and then you'll be able to interact with that NPC in a different way because you had this token. It might also ask you if you have a particular secret card. So as you're going through this story and trying to uncover bits and pieces, you're either helping people around the town, you're trying to investigate particular pieces of lore, you're going to find some cards that might go into your dragon book, and there's just a lot of things that you're going to be able to do, and you're not going to have enough time to do them all. In addition to all the numbers that are printed here, so like I said, I can just go to 24 or 35 or 10 or whatever, and it's going to kind of give me a rundown of everything that's going to happen there. There's also some secret numbers that you might find hidden in the page. If you can actually find a number hidden somewhere, you can actually go to that part of the scenario book as well. Now, this map is going to be in an actual storybook. Like I said, this is just the demo, so it's not all present here. You'll be able to flip through and actually go through multiple pages. And again, the decisions that you're making here are going to change the way that the story moves forwards. You'll be able to side with different factions potentially, or be able to maybe help somebody or choose not to help somebody. And again, that's going to be referenced by putting out more of these tokens or by getting specific cards from the secret deck. One thing I want to talk about that you're going to encounter a lot is challenges or skill checks. You're going to get these at particular points in the book. You're going to get these at particular points in the town when you go maybe talk to somebody or you're trying to persuade somebody or perform a specific feat. The game is going to go into a push your luck mini game where you're trying to hit a very specific number. You're going to have a chart that shows you all of your different successes. You're going to take the item deck, which you can earn those items and they just become items, or you can flip them and look at the top number of your item deck. And like I said, it's push your luck. So if I look and I drew a 1, I'm looking to see, do I like that outcome? Probably not. So I'm going to choose to draw another. So I'll draw another. Now I'm at 3. I'll draw another. Now I'm at 4. So you want to get as close to those good numbers as you can and then stop. You'll also notice that some of these cards have an eclipse icon. Every challenge is going to tell you something that happens when you draw these eclipse icons. A lot of them are saying, if you draw a second eclipse icon, something bad happens. So even if you haven't hit the goal that you want to hit, you might want to stop as soon as you get your first eclipse icon because you don't want to push your luck and draw a second eclipse icon because something bad will happen. Now, the scenario portion of the game is going to go back and forth between exploring the map, going to combat, and going through the prompts that are printed in the book. You're going to go through that back and forth until you reach the end of the scenario. You don't necessarily know what your goals are or when the scenario will end, but as you're kind of getting information and you're kind of making some of these choices, you are starting to see, even within the first 2 scenarios, you're seeing a little bit of that overarching story. There's a little bit of a mystery happening here. You're finding some things. I found a lot of cards that were very intriguing, and I went down some rabbit holes of going to investigate some things that maybe took up a little bit too much of my time, but I really wanted to unlock some more lore and learn more about the world that this takes place in. But as you go through these different scenarios, you're going to be unlocking cards, you're going to be gaining new companions in the form of taming, and every time you start a new scenario, you're going to be able to start fresh with a new character and a new deck of 10 cards. And those cards, like I said, are going to be unlocked. You're going to be instructed to open up those specific packs at specific times, which are going to give you more cards that you can deck build with. Every character has an element. You can use cards with the character's name, you can use cards with that element, and you can use generic cards. So if you're a fan, of that LCG model where you're getting everything you need in the box, but if you're playing through the storyline, it's kind of giving that to you at a pace. It's pacing it out. So you're kind of getting that feeling of ripping open packs every so often to get new cards that you can then use in deck building. So between all those new cards, all of the new dragons that you can tame, you're going to be having a very different experience as you play through scenario to kind of beat out that whole story. Now, the roguelite mode uses all of the same combat rules that I already talked about. You're using all of the same map and components, but you're changing out this storyline map here. In fact, this whole thing is going to go away and it gets replaced by this roguelite map. And this is a map that you're going to follow in order to fight increasingly difficult enemies as you make your way to trying to fight the ultimate boss. And there are a ton of components that come specifically for the roguelite mode. Of course, you've got monster cards for all the monsters you're going to fight, and you have this set of tier cards. And these tier cards are kind of randomizers that are going to determine what level of monster you fight. If you look at all these different locations, they're numbered 1 through 5, and you're going to be choosing a tier card, and it's going to tell you which monster you're going to fight in that particular tier. You've also got some special artifact cards here that you can earn as well, and some boss cards. So the roguelite is using a lot of the same mechanics combat-wise, but you're now moving through this map, and there's all of these branching choices that you can make. As you choose to go through some different areas, you're going to get some deck building opportunities, you're going to get some XP, you're going to get some healing. There's a lot of different icons on this map, and this is just one of the many different roguelite maps that they're going to have in the final version of the game. But as you make your choice and move through these different areas, you're going to be able to keep increasing your deck. You're going to be earning experience. You're going to be earning experience from fighting enemies. You're going to be earning experience from taking certain paths in the game. and you can spend that experience. You can spend it to take cards out of the upgrade deck and add those cards into your deck. You can spend it to heal. You can spend it to get some artifacts that are going to stay with you. The whole goal of this is to see how far you can get before you die. That's the whole theme of a roguelite. How far can you push until you die? And they even say, you will die. You're going to die. You're going to die a lot, because that's the whole point of the game, is to get better. At a certain point, you're going to have so many better cards in your deck. You're going to have so many artifacts out in front of you that those early fights will start becoming easier and easier, and you'll be able to push your luck farther and farther and eventually get to one of those bosses or fight the final boss of the roguelite. I have not played this enough to beat the roguelite. I actually died just a few fights in. So I just find myself drawn to keep going back to it. So both of these versions of the game are available in Dragon Eclipse. You're going to have everything you need to play either the story mode with the scenarios or the roguelite mode. And again, there are 2-player rules coming that I don't have. So I'm interested to see both the co-op aspect of the game and the PvP aspect of the game. So you're going to have a huge variety of ways to play this game. It is a very satisfying experience, taming those monsters, building those decks. It takes a lot of LCG, CCG buttons, I think, as well as, some of that monster hunting that I think people love out there. So that is Dragon Eclipse. You can find out all of this and more by looking at its Gamefound page, but please leave any questions or comments you have down below, or join our Discord, where I guarantee I'm going to be posting some pictures of all of these amazing miniatures and having more conversation about this game. So thank you so much for watching, and until we see you again, make sure everyone has fun at the table.